Good day. As you might have been aware, we've been working on SithasoApex, which is a wrap of ApexCharts component. The objective of this project was to make it easy to draw up charts, like for example, using HTML attributes. Now, the focus of this particular demo is to indicate in terms of how we have been able to create the charts at runtime. For example, on the left side is a static chart, which is basically created by one using these attributes. However, on the right side, we have created the same chart, but we're using runtime attributes. For example, you have a clear, which is basically will clear whatever we have created here, and then add new categories, and then add a series, and then refresh the chart. So for example, let's clear this. So it's a blank chart. Let's initialize it, which basically means that we're withdrawing it from scratch. And then if we change the values of the series and everything else, you see that the chart is being redrawn. So what we're trying to do for all of the examples that are here is to make sure that the runtime creation of the charts themselves work. So the disparity between the HTML that is here and then the runtime HTML that is actually fed into the charts themselves. The layout at the end of it is that the creation of this chart is based on this HTML that you see here, excluding the categories and the data. And then here, when we actually execute the clearing of the chart and then the adding of the category in the series and the refresh, then it redraws the chart. So this works perfectly for situations where one wants a chart, but then might want to change it at runtime. So we've done a line chart. We've done all the charts that we're having here, for example, the line chart that is here, which basically means that we are able to generate it at runtime and the various sections. Like for example, this one is grouped, and then this one is a straight line chart, so we can have random values, and then it's animated. So this demo is actually an advancement of what we have previously done, because in real life situation you'd want to draw a chart, but then at times you'd want to have it updated at runtime when, for example, you are creating your dashboards and things like that, and you want them to be refreshed at particular time intervals, with the chart's content and new information. This is an example of a step line chart. So you're able to clear, basically execute that, and then randomize it, and then it works exactly the same as what is here. But because this one is a static one, this one is actually a runtime chart that we are able to do. Dashed line chart, also the same example, So what is happening with the dashed line chart is, for example, you are indicating that the series itself should be dashed. Like for example, there it's dashed. So here also, you're also calling set series dash to true to make sure that the planned series is dashed. So as you can see here, you can actually indicate that for each of the series, the other one can be dashed and the other one cannot be dashed, depending on your particular needs. But we're just demonstrating in terms of how you can effect the runtime changes on the chart itself and then make it work, So this one is already a runtime chart because this is being updated at runtime, as you can see in relation to what is happening here, there's no data, there's nothing, but then you are indicating that the chart is real time, and then which basically means that at runtime, it is actually updated with the values that are there. So the code for it is actually in the HTML of the page itself. So this one is the one with the annotations. As you can see here, we've indicated that this looks like money. So it's basically it's taking up that setting there. So you can have date, you can have money, you can have thousands, you can have a number or default. So depending in relation to what kind of display you want to do. And this also affects the x-axis and also the y-axis in relation to how you want your chart to be displayed. This is a column chart also. We're able to draw it at runtime. So what I've done basically is to ensure that all our chart examples meet a runtime functionality, so that one is able to draw them at runtime, so that they are able to create your charts with minimal code as much as possible. I mean, if you've gone through the ApexCharts documentation, the objects to create the charts, it gives a lot of flexibility. And as much as you are also able to feed your options here via the attributes and also via runtime code, you'll be able to also customize the chart to be whatever you want it to be. So there's no limitation as much as there is this particular easy way of creating a chart. Because, for example, creating this particular chart here, we added categories, which is January to May, there, then added a series revenue target, and then indicated the various colors and then the various values for the particular categories, and then we executed refresh, which basically is giving out that chart there. So what we're saying is, as much as you might want to create a chart that is going to be static using the attributes, where, for example, you just want to display data and without it being real time or without being updated at runtime. However, we are giving now the optionality to say that, fine, what if your chart you needed to update it based on some server-side events or something like that? So let's add functionality that makes sure that you're able to actually do that, So this actually helps so that if, for example, we are creating a dashboard and things like that, you are able to actually see a real life information depending on what you actually wanting to draw on your chart. So as you can see here, there's a lot of different chart types that we're actually trying to conclude, and this makes it easy for one to actually do the charts at runtime, because with a number of code lines, one is able to also have a chart. The other thing about this is we've standardized the way that the charts are getting created at runtime, because as you might have noted, it's clear, it's add categories, it's add series, and then it's refresh. So most of these charts, they follow the same methodology in terms of how you create them, Like, for example, here, because it is actually a donor chart and things, the value is just one indicated here. But for example, where, for example, we have multiple values for the categories, then you specify them as an array. So it makes it easy for one to actually do the charts without complicated jargon, without complications in terms of if you want to create a chart, follow this same methodology to do it, and then it works. So whilst the attribute version might be extended due to having to have your categories here and the data here, but it also make it easy where, for example, you just want a static chart to be on your website or your web app to showcase something, and then when you want to actually then make it a real-time chart, then you are able to actually get it to display random content, or the content that you want to get it to display at runtime. So what I've tried to do as much as possible is to simplify the chart creating process by following the same methodology, so that it's standardized across the board. Like your stacked area chart is here, your range area chart is also here. You can customize the content that you see here as much as possible. And your runtime plot chart. There are some other charts that have not been included in relation to this example, but it's a process that will undertake over the course of the days to make sure that we add their other charts. For example, there's bubble charts, there's heat charts, there's timeline charts, and all sorts of other charts. So what we did here was, for example, to set the rounded excuse me, the rounded edges of this. For example, this is a radial bar. We indicated the start angle and an end angle, and then the bar labels were saying that the bar labels should be shown, which basically it's showing us that particular information that is there. So we can actually make these round edges to not be by just setting up an attribute on the charts themselves. So let's continue with the charts. And then this one here is the radial bar, Also, it's able to be done at runtime. This one is a dashed version of that one. And it's dashed because we're saying do a dashed radial. And then, of course, you can customize it with some of the settings that you will see on the README file in relation to how do you customize the charts based on the attributes that are there. So the README file is actually very extensive in terms of explaining what each of the various charts do and what kind of settings that we will be able to set up and all sorts of other things. We will be looking at that in just a couple of minutes. So we'll try to cover as much as possible in terms of all the various charts, in terms of how they are created at runtime. But the methodology, as I've indicated, is the same. You're adding a series, you're adding a category, and you refresh. In everything that we'll see here is following the same premise. And then internally, the component itself will structure the data in relation to how it's supposed to be looking like. For example, here, we added categories, we added colors, we added data. But if we do this on this side, then it converts it to be appropriate in relation to how we want it to look like. So as you can see here, everything is just working in a good related, well-oiled machine kind of a way, so that at the end of the day, we have simple charts without the complexities of having to worry about this and this and that. I mean, this works well for non-technical people that want to do charts. They can just use the various attributes that they can use, and then if they want to have charts at runtime, then they are able to actually have those working without any hassles, as long as you understand in terms of how chat works and what kind of information that you'll need to be putting forward in relation to the charts themselves. So for example, this is a stacked area chart. It's this particular example, but then you can just change the data to be what you want it to be. And then a stacked bar chart, which is basically this one here, but we have stacked it. So again, it's going to the same thing, categories and series all the time. Okay, this one is a runtime one that actually shows a pie chart, and we have put the legend on top. And also this one, it shows some data labels in relation to some of the options that we want. And then the sparkline here, and with some very interesting options, like example, we don't want the grid to show, the tooltips must not show. We've added a subtitle. We have changed the font of the subtitle. That's why it's bigger like that. Sparkline is true to say that it should be, and then the height of the chart itself, hidden legends, don't show data labels, don't show the toolbar. So as you can see here through the options of the attributes that we've done, it has actually redrawn our chart to be in this particular version based on our attributes that we have indicated here. So let's go again. Okay, this one is the runtime version of it, of course. You see, so let's randomize it and see what happens. So as you can see here, it's just drawing the sparkline charts much as possible. This one is a sparkline line chart. Of course, you can also create a pie chart of the sparkline. You can also create a column chart like this one here, So this is basically based on this, but the items here actually are further apart from each other, but you can customize it, to make the column wins to be like 100%, no margins and all sorts of other things. But it makes it simple for you to actually create the charts themselves. And then random color, title, labels, and reset. So this was also demonstrating some of the runtime functionality that we're able to have. This, as you can recall in our previous examples, we did this, but now we've added each chart, each chart, like 34 charts here, just to demonstrate in terms of how would you do a similar chart at runtime. in relation to making sure that you have your reporting, your dashboards working, and all sorts of other things. You can even remove the gradients and all sorts of chart functionalities. So we also have a back to top button here that will actually take you to the top of, like for example, you go to example 1 here. Okay, this is back here. I have to remove that. And then go to example 3. And all of these have tooltips so that you see in relation to what type of chart that we're dealing with. Basic area chart, simple S-line chart, you know. So we try to be as much as informative as possible in relation to the type of charts that are happening here, and also so that you see the various examples, so that you can understand and also be able to choose whether you want a static chart, you're going to do it like this. You want a real-time chart that is going to be updated at runtime, then you do it like that. So this actually brings us to the finality of this particular component at this particular moment in time. As I'm indicating, the other charts that we need to do that are like bubble, hit charts, funnel charts, and timeline charts, and all sorts of other things. But the premise will basically be the same across the board in relation to how we're actually feeding the information into the charts, categories, series, and then refresh to actually create the various charts that are there. So this has been a very interesting project. I'm going to clean this up. This has been a very interesting project to do because I've quite learned a lot in relation to the internals of ApexCharts and what you can do and all sorts of other things. So for example, this one is thousands, it's not money. In terms of the output format, like Y output format, we've rotated the labels to 90 degrees. So it actually makes it easy for you to actually just do the charts and make it work for you in a very, very nice, seamless way, you know. So thank you for your time for going through this. But what we're trying to do here is to make it as understandable as possible and as simply as possible, just to create a chart without having to track or skull about options and all sorts of other things. But understanding the options is also very important, because at the end of the day, for advanced features, then you can delve deeper in terms of customizing the chart and making it as much as possible to be what you want it to be. And like Rumble here, as you can see here, some of these charts are very opinionated in terms of, if, for example, you want to have this particular type of a chart, a column chart, then the bars will look like that and things like that. Of course, yeah, what we did was to actually decrease the column width. Like for example, most of the time it's like 70%. We've decreased it to 40 to make the column width to be a little bit smaller. And we've set the data label portion to be at the center, basically meaning that the data labels, if they are shown here, they'll show in the middle, it's somewhere there, and all sorts of other things. So it's things that we've been trying to do, like vertical data label basically means that the labels, instead of showing horizontal, they'll show vertical. So it's some of the options that you actually can turn on and all sorts of things. But of course, the data labels in relation to some of these examples is actually off. So you can set the options in relation to what you want to do. Perhaps what we can do, let's just look in terms of the README file and what it has. So let's go through to our Visual Studio. README, this is where this thing is. Okay, let's try open it. Open preview. Okay. I just hope that this works. Okay, let's see. Yeah, let me close this. Now this is the code. Okay, let me just do this one here. So SithasoApex web component and all sorts of things. Okay, this talks in terms of how do you install this, all sorts of things. We're using the ApexCharts bundle here because we just customize it a little bit so that it does some of the other things that we need to do. It was just one addition of a simple function, because there was something that was not working on the Apex chart, and then we just wrote a function to make sure that it works in relation to the radius of the segments and things. Yeah. So for example, here, a quick start, this is defining how you actually do a chart when you're using the various attributes, and then data formats, then the attributes, then it tells you in relation to what each of these things do, and then the runtime options, what is it that they are actually doing, because we have some public methods that are actually doing that. And then here, we look at the examples themselves, you know. Here, for example, this is updating the chart at runtime, update data, and then here, this is runtime where you actually have a chart, you're adding a series, adding a category, and then you actually uh, update it and refresh it and things like that. The example doesn't look well. But anyway, this is the quick start. Again, I see my AI friend here just did a lot of about this particular readme file. We have to clean it up a little bit. But anyway, these are the universal properties in relation to what is it that they are and the kind of charts that you can do, the data, which is supposed to be in JSON file, JSON format, the options that we have, which is basically feeding into the options from ApexCharts options that you can use. So any option an Apex chart you can use here by specifying it here as a JSON. And then the height, which is basically 350, the width is 100%, the theme, loading, Boolean to show legend, you know, whether we want to show the legend, the position, bottom left, right. Actually, I think this is supposed to be middle. I just need to confirm with the documentation. Show toolbar, yes or no. The toolbar where you want to export the title. Show data labels, it's false by default. So basically, if you want to show the data labels, you can turn it to true. Data labels orientation, vertical auto, position, where it's supposed to be. Stack total center, for stack chart, show total values centered, and all sorts of things. X label, X axis title, the title that appears on the X axis, Y title. There's quite a lot of options that you can actually set up, you know, for your chart and all sorts of other things. And some of them, because they are already defaults, you can just change them to be the defaults that you want. But this is self-explanatory in terms of the various options that you can set and all sorts of other things, you know. So the chart types. So this one now, it looks at each chart type, like for example, the line chart, what options it uses, and then the example, and then this one looks at the column charts and all sorts of other things. It's just giving you much more information in terms of looking at the various chart types, donut charts. How is it that we did the donut chart? You know, and then radial bar chart, how was it done, and all sorts of things, which basically is just a reproduction of that particular example that we're seeing in the demo. So I try to provide as much information as possible in relation to the various chart types here. And you can always, of course, refer to the HTML where you get stuck in relation to how the charts work and things, but it's giving a lot of content in relation to how each of the charts works and how is it customized and how does it work, so that at the end of the day you are easily educated in terms of how things work and all sorts of other things. So at any case, do you have any questions in relation to how this work and all sorts of other things, then you can always push up a question on the or a discussion on the GitHub repo, or fork it and then customize it to suit your need or whatever. But the whole goal of this particular process was just to say, let's add functionality to be able to create charts as quickly as possible via HTML attributes and also via runtime exercises where you just want to create a chart. Because in what I'm doing in relation to developing the applications, I need charts that are able to be updatable at runtime due to changes in data or server-side events. So yeah, so this is basically it. Well, most of this, of course, as you can see, it has been created using an AI agent, but with AI agent, this takes a lot of time to do. I'm still learning how to prompt these things and all sorts of other things. It makes mistakes. I have to revert back at times, but it has been a joyful exercise to kind of realize that the dream in relation to me having this particular component working, and doing exactly what is it that I'd like it to do, with tweak and changing and some sleepless nights, at least it works. So yeah, so we journey in. It's been a very eye-opening exercise, and there's still a lot of code that needs to be adjusted here and things, but it does what it's meant to do. Of course, I mean the option of just using ApexChart as it is, it's welcome for anyone, but for my purposes, I just needed to make this as simple as possible. Yes, it's adding an extra luggage in terms of the JavaScript code that is there in relation to this particular exercise, but it's helpful for me to achieve my objectives. Okay, then thank you so much for your time again. I've taken you through the component itself in terms of how it works and how we have simplified the chart creation process, because at the end of the day, this particular component is built for non-technical people who are just wanting charts without the extended learning curve in terms of how does this thing work, do I have to learn it, and all sorts of other things. Though it's very good to understand how things work, but at the end of the day, you just want something simple that you can plug and play. I mean, this is straightforward, and this is just straightforward, to create your chart and get it going without having to crack your skull and wonder and all sorts of other things. But the documentation for ApexChart is very informative. They explain everything to you in terms of how to customize the chart, which is why we have an options here to customize the chart to be whatever you want it to be. So yeah, but for my purposes and anyone who wants a similar approach in relation to creating these charts, the solution is basically, yeah, all right. So the purpose is just to make the life of coders a little bit easy. So I'm hoping that you find uh, some joy into using this, customizing it the way that you want if you want to, and also to other things. But basically, these are just all the attributes that are used to render the charts, and most of everything else is just defaults and defaults and defaults and defaults, because at the end of the day, your charts will basically be looking the same, and then just bring out the information you want to be reporting on and things. All right, then. Thank you so much. That's all for today.